I couldn't be Dexter Morgan anymore. He was cursed. And I wasn't going to pass that curse down to Harrison.
Hey guys, Pete here. This will be my breakdown of Dexter New Blood episode 6. We've passed the mid-season, we're moving towards the conclusion, and things are starting to fall into place. There were some big reveals, insight into character motivations, and the big bad showdown is starting to shape up. I'm going to recap everything that happened and talk about what it might mean about where things are going right after this quick spoiler warning. If you haven't watched Too Many Tuna Sandwiches, episode 6 of New Blood, then this video might not be for you, and with that out of the way, let's get into it. The 6th episode opens bright and early the morning after episode 5's ending. Harrison is chopping wood and feeding the animals before Dexter wakes up. He thinks this is about him making a good decision to send him to therapy, but it's really because of what Kurt told him about doing something kind for someone when you're pissed off at them. This is an interesting point in his continuing to misinterpret things about his son because of their situation. Deb echoes the idea that he's doing the right thing, as opposed to what his father Harry did with him. He finds the job application and isn't sure about how he feels about Harrison going to work for the father of his latest victim. When they argue about it, he tries to frame it in a different way, but it all just serves to make the teenager more committed to taking the job. He reveals that he didn't go to the therapy session, that instead he talked to Kurt and it was his idea to do his chores. And this leaves Dex wondering, why is Kurt Caldwell suddenly so interested in my son? It's a good question and one we don't get the answer to right away, but what we do get is a little more insight into how much of a freak Kurt actually is. He's trying to make a sort of mask to cover Chloe's gunshot wound, and when it's not to his liking, he breaks down and starts punching the corpse, lamenting what a waste. And the situation has him wound up. Later we see that he's pretty desperate outside the truck stop and he notices a new girl. He rushes over to make an introduction. He ends up giving her hundreds of dollars and tries to move things along so he can get her into his truck and out to the cabin, only she's traveling with her boyfriend who comes back to tell her that they have a ride and they take off together, and Kurt looks pretty pissed. Then Harrison comes up talking about the job, telling him that his dad's not alright with it and won't sign the paper, but he wants to do it anyway. And Kurt doesn't seem to care, says he can have the job, he signs it himself, and the wrestling match is brought up before they cut away. On his way into town, Angela pulls Dexter over and shows him the obituary. She's clearly upset, Dexter's taken by surprise, and she tells him to drive directly to the station and she'll follow to make sure that he doesn't try to run away. It's a tense setup, it's the moment he's been fearing, and she rightly starts by pointing out that he's been lying to her since they first met. He does a good job of delivering his lie. He dramatically tells her that he was running from all of the death. First his wife was murdered and then his sister, so he drove his boat into the hurricane expecting to die. But when he lived, he thought he deserved another chance. It all adds up, taking extreme measures for sure, but all in response to this trauma that he went through. And the character does his best to get it to come across as sincere, with a hint that he's watching how it's landing and how she's reacting to guide where he goes. It's probably the best crafted scene the show has put together since the early ones with Harrison, and the two performances here really sell it. We follow her facial expressions while Angela takes it all in, and even though it appears that she accepts that he might be telling her the truth, she's not ready to move past it. She says that all she knows is relationships are built on trust, and how can she ever trust him again? And I really liked how when she was pushing back in relation to Harrison, that she kept trying to refocus things back to Dexter because he kept deflecting. And we'll see that happen again when he's in the therapist office later. So it was a really interesting scene. We'll come back and talk about it some more later. She's just not interested in talking with him anymore at that time and needs some space to sort of wrap her head around what's going on and how she feels about it. After he goes, Molly comes in and she wants to work with Angela to figure out what's going on with Kurt, and she tells her to stay away from him. She doesn't want to spook a suspect before she has a chance to build a case. Molly half-heartedly agrees to stay away, but it doesn't seem like she's going to actually do that. Ever since Angela pulled him over, he's been trying to figure out how she found out who he really is. Since she just spent the weekend away with a true crime podcaster, Molly becomes his main suspect. And while he's at work, he decides to look into her. He listens to the Bay Harbor Butcher episode of her podcast. As she's describing things, we hear him say, the good old days. And more importantly, that she's skeptical that Dokes actually did it. She says that she tracked someone down on Reddit from Special Ops and that he said that Dokes was out of town when some of the killings happened, so there was no way he could be the killer. Something to keep in mind for later, to be sure. Harrison is becoming a bit of a legend around school, and Audrey asks him out. He's into it, but then he gets a text from Dexter saying they're going to therapy together. It appears that he's taking Angela's advice while at the same time making sure that Harrison follows through. Dexter just sort of fumbles around until Harrison lays out everything that happened with Rita, Hannah, and how he learned that his father abandoned him. The therapist isn't impressed with "it was a tough time for everyone" and says he'll have to dig deeper for the sessions to work. When asked to talk about his past, Dexter isn't able to say anything meaningful, despite this being the perfect opportunity for him to do so. And he manages to derail the whole thing when he says that his marriage to Rita sort of fell apart. His son points out that his mother was murdered by a serial killer, and Dex quickly says, well, he was so young. You don't remember anything. And we learn that he just knows about the messed up stuff he's read online. As it continues, it becomes apparent that Dexter won't go into what's really going on with him, and Harrison feels abandoned all over again in the session. After he tries to make dinner at home and is left eating by himself, he thinks about Molly again and decides to call Logan to try to get more information from him. When they meet, he ends up more concerned about the situation because he finds out that they aren't together anymore. And with Matt not being dead, why is she still in Iron Lake? Angela is trying to put together what Kurt might be hiding and decides to go search the caves when she realizes that Kurt wanted the search to go on right up until he didn't, when he heard that they were going to search them. Harrison comes over to see Audrey. He tells her that he's so angry and that he thinks about hurting people. He brings up Ethan, which she says is different because he had to. He saved them. But he tells her that it wasn't the first time he did something like that. Just recently on the way there from Florida, someone tried to touch him while he was sleeping. And again, she's quick to say that that was justified too. Then he admits that he thinks about hurting everyone all the time. Her backstory has so many similarities to his, with her mom leaving and her dad dying after he married Angela, that she gets it. They both feel like they don't fit anywhere and they're on the outside looking in, and they agree that that can mess you up. They have a connection and they hook up, and when they lay back on the bed, you can see that Harrison has the straight razor in his back pocket. The next morning, Angela finds him in Audrey's bed and drives him home. It's another thing to point out how Dex lacks even the basic parental instincts. Not knowing what to do about it, he shifts his focus on Molly instead. Things take an interesting turn there when he runs into her talking to Kurt at the tavern. He plugs in his phone using the charger at the bar and records their conversation. He then follows them when he sees them leaving and listens to what they were saying. Kurt admits that he lied about the FaceTime and claims that Matt is hiding out at his cabin. He offers to let Molly interview him if she doesn't tell anyone where she's going. So he's luring her to the middle of nowhere with no one knowing where she's at. And as he approaches, Dexter notices a very serious serial killer vibe about the whole situation. He sees them going through the basement and he has a moment there where he thinks that he could just let her die and then she would be out of his hair for good, but decides that he should intervene instead. While they're in the hallway on the way to the room, Molly is starting to get freaked out. And just in time, Dex opens the storm door. Kurt is surprised but has to pretend it and gets even more upset when Dexter forces his way in to get a look at the room. He's able to get Molly out of there. She now thinks he's a good guy, and he now knows that Kurt is the serial killer that Angela has been looking for. She's at the caves with Teddy searching while everyone else is at the wrestling match. Things get crazy there when Harrison gets headbutted, and even though he comes back to win the match, he doesn't stop and he intentionally breaks the other wrestler's arm in front of everyone. Dexter recognizes the pattern here. This is the second time he's done something crazy violent, but immediately after it happens, he's concerned that Kurt is right there. Things are obviously weird between them now that he's seen the kill room, and Dexter can't hide the fact that he doesn't want him anywhere near Harrison. They have words, then they have to leave, and before Dexter and Harrison can talk about what's really going on, he gets a call from Angela, who has discovered Iris's body in the cave. She tells him that she doesn't need Jim, she needs Dexter Morgan, and the episode comes to an end. So not only did a lot happen, we also moved closer to answers about some of the things the show has been asking us to think about. Harrison is bothered by persistent violent thoughts, and if he continues to act out, people are going to notice. Kurt was so obsessed with getting a replacement for Chloe that he admitted that he lied to the police about the conversation with Matt and sending someone to use his cards in New York. Obviously, he was hoping that she wouldn't be around to tell anyone after he was finished. But now Molly has some information that's bad for him. Angela's finding Iris is a little puzzling at this point based on what we've seen. There's nothing that looks similar to what's happening in Kurt's basement, but I imagine her saying she needs Dexter Morgan means she needs his forensic skills. Perhaps he'll find some connection, or we'll learn that this is not related and this is something else. He'll probably be shifting his focus completely towards Kurt, and it seems likely that Harrison will be pushed further in that direction in the process. Why he's going out of his way to get close to him is still up in the air, but I imagine that we're heading towards open hostilities between Kurt and Dexter after the basement and the wrestling match. Not to mention that Dexter's thing is killing serial killers. One thing about this episode was that it seemed to confirm that Harrison and Molly's motivations were sort of exactly what they said they were. Molly came to Iron Lake because she heard about Matt going missing, and her presence might not be connected to her having some secret information. And Harrison tracked down his dad because he wanted answers in hopes that it might help him get past his anger. There's still a ton to speculate on both of these characters, but I'll pick that up in the next video when I put that out in a couple of days. There were some funny moments between Dexter thinking about the good old days listening to the podcast and Logan saying you have no idea how many books I've read about this when he asked him how to patch things up with Angela. 3 pretty heavy sequences, Dexter and Angela at the station, with Harrison at the therapist and him confessing to Audrey. Then a few full-blown WTF moments with Kurt punching Chloe's corpse, Angela finding Iris, and Harrison turning on full psycho arm-breaking mode in front of everybody. There's a lot of parallels between the different stories here, and that sets up a situation where people overlook things or they're not equipped to handle things, and there's a lot of close calls of either people making breakthroughs or getting what they need that's all wrapped up in that. It's kind of a fun dynamic where we know that if Dexter said, hey, my mom was killed when I was a kid right in front of me, that they could probably make progress in therapy. And I think that's a good place to leave things. Let me know how you felt about the episode in the comments. Let me know what your theories are. Mine have shifted a lot, so definitely check back for my follow-up video in a couple of days when I think about this. And leave a comment and let me know what you're thinking about. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.